let me know. Michelle has just started the recording. So as I said, if you put your video off, go on mute if you don't want to be included in the recording. Just to welcome you all, I'm Josephine Bleach. I'm Director of the Early Learning Initiative in the National College of Ireland, and I'm also Chair of the Home Visiting Alliance. And this, sorry, you have to press got it, obviously. This, I suppose, webinar is coming to you from the Home Visiting Alliance. Thanks to the funding we received through the Wheels Training Links programme and from the Department of Children's What Works grant. I'll talk a bit more about the Home Visiting Alliance in a minute. Just to say we're delighted to welcome Zara here today to talk about neurodiversity and pathways to supports. I think it's an issue home visitors across the country have been grappling with. You know, when you see a child and a parent and you want to give them the best chance in life, you want to make sure they get all the supports they need, and sometimes they need signposting to where to go, and they need support and access and all that lovely inclusion piece to where they're supported to achieve their dreams and their goals and all they want out of life. So the agenda today, I'm just going to give a short overview of the Home Visiting Alliance and a few updates about what's been happening. Then Zara Doyle from As I Am will talk about neurodiversity and pathway supports. There'll be time for questions after Zara's talk, and then we'll get into breakout rooms where everybody has an opportunity to discuss their own practice, their own learning, and has an opportunity again to think about how we can go forward with this, learning from what Zara has said. And I suppose this is something that has come up consistently in terms of home visiting at every webinar we've done over the last few years and in our meetings. So I think today is the start of a conversation with Zara and As I Am, rather than an end, if that may, or a once-off. There are a few questions in the chat. Okay, sorry, people are giving apologies. Michelle, will you keep an eye on the chat, and if somebody wants something, just let me know. The other piece, if you have questions or anything like that, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. And if you feel the need to ask something immediately, just raise your hand and we'll get to you as well. So I think that's it. Just thank you all very much for coming. Delighted that you're all here, and it's such an interesting, it'll be such an interesting morning. So the Home Visiting Alliance, which most of you probably know by now, is the collaboration of 5 evidence-based home visiting programs: community mothers, soon to be community families, infant mental health, Life Start, Preparing for Life, and Parent Child Plus. And I have to say a big thank you to the subcommittee who organised this. So we would have had Trish Hurley from the Infant Mental Health Let's Grow Together in Cork, Sue Cullen from Preparing for Life, Katrina Corcoran from Community Mothers, and Michelle Moore from Parent Child Plus. And I also want to pay a special tribute and thank you, because unfortunately they can't be here today, is that for Mary Walker Callaghan from Life Start in Donegal, who has done tremendous work on this, but due to the Crestlock tragedy, she's supporting her home visitors who are supporting families within the area. And unfortunately, some of the home visitors have also been affected by the tragedy. So I just like, because we're all embedded in our communities, we've all known tragedies, we've all held the hands of families while they have gone through challenging times. And just to give a minute in our thoughts for, I suppose, the community, the families, the children in Crestlock who are trying to come to terms with such an awful tragedy. So for us, the home visiting is the collective national voice of early childhood home visiting, and we're also a subgroup of PEN. Our objectives is to promote home visiting, support our members' organisations, and contribute to policy. And you'll be delighted to know that as part of the What Works grant, we have got funding to conduct a feasibility study as part of the new national approach to home visiting. And I'll talk about it later on, but Maynooth, the team in Maynooth, there was a press release recently from the department, have been commissioned to undertake a review of home visiting services in Ireland and look at best practice here and from abroad, and I suppose support that agreed national approach. What we'll be doing is we'll be talking to all of our members. We'll be looking at how we do it and how best we can do it into the future if there's to be a national approach. So it's a really exciting time. It's like the beginning of a new era in home visiting, where we would hope that every child in Ireland would have access to early childhood home visiting if they needed it. And we believe actually every child needs it in some form or fashion. And I suppose, again, what this session is to contribute to our learning on how we could do better for children and families across Ireland. Now, saying that, I'm moving on to introduce Zara Doyle, who is, I suppose, the star for today, and whom you all really want to hear rather than me. So Zara has lots of experience in all walks of life, from early years to her work with DCU. And she also has done a lot of work with parents and children in the community context. And she also has her own parental experience of having a child who is, well, we're all neurodiverse, but, you know, so I think, again, she has somebody who has autism. And again, it's about supporting children and recognizing everybody is different and everybody thinks differently. And just as culture is recognized, we now have to recognize neurodiversity as something that we need to support and play to people's strengths with. So I'll hand you over to Zara. There'll be 10 minutes for chat at the end. But if during the talk there's something you don't understand or whatever, just put it in the chat or put up your hand, and we're happy to take the question. Okay, thank you. There's nothing in the chat, Michelle, at the moment, is there? No, great. Okay, Zara, over to you.
Great stuff. I'm just going to get myself shared here.
That's perfect, Sarah.
And sorry, now just 1 second.
It always works perfectly
I know,
in practice. And then when you come to do it.
Absolutely.
You know.
Hit the 2 buttons. Oh, yeah.
The struggle is real, people.
But it is actually wonderful, you know, because all of the Home Visiting Alliance, all of our meetings have been online. And I just think it's wonderful the way we've all overcome all our IT issues and all the rest to actually make it work. So again, thanks to everybody involved. It has just been fantastic. So Zara, are you ready to go?
Yeah, can you see presenter view there or the?
No, we have the proper view, Sarah. Thank you.
Have the view, yeah.
Okay, I always get confused by that part. Apologies. Great. Well, I suppose I'll get started. I have a lot to get through. So I'm so grateful for Michelle for contacting me to give this talk today. I love talking about this topic because it's so personal to me as well. I've been working in the autism field for about 16 years now. So I've kind of been around the block as a parent, but also as a professional at this stage. I was a very young parent when I started off. At the moment in my journey, I have just been taken on as the training manager, and as I am So I have a huge number of different projects ranging from early years all the way through to adulthood, kind of in the works at the moment. We've just released our Teach Me As I Am program last night, which I'm really excited about because it's all based around the early intervention side of things and relationships with families and parents. And I think a lot of that will be very relevant to all of you guys that are going into the home, and really looking at levels of support we can offer to different types of family units. So my first experience of motherhood is this little guy right here. So it would probably be considered quite unusual. I was just 20 and I had this beautiful baby boy named Luke in January in 2006. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was blessed with a big family and lots of support. And my husband and I were married at the tender age of 22, and it has been a complete whirlwind ever since. Luke lost all of his words around 18 months, a complete regression. No more mama, dada, or car. It was absolutely devastating. And we had people coming into our home to support, a public health nurse appointment and things like that. And that's how we got started on our journey, but mostly because people in our family were making that comparison with other relatives and saying, oh, he should really be speaking by now, or why is he playing so repetitively with that toy, or what is this repetitive behavior that's happening, or different sensory kind of issues that were starting to pop up more often. And it was really my journey to understanding what that meant for my son and how it was all going to play out, really. So it was after what felt like a lifetime of waiting lists. When Luke was finally 5, he got his answers. So we found out that he was autistic. He finally received his diagnosis after 22 months on a waiting list. We had been living in Clondalkin in Dublin and then moved to Kildare. We were about 12 minutes down the road and had to go to the bottom of the list in Kildare. So it was a really stressful time. I was going through some really difficult personal accepting the new kind of outlook on life and what it was going to be. And I'm still learning every day from him, by the way. It doesn't stop. He's 16 now, but it certainly doesn't stop. I learned so much just from my engagement with him. But what happened was it took me years to kind of understand things. And as I said, I'm still learning every day. So in search for answers to help him, I turned to studying. And Luke has never really slept. Even now, he still doesn't sleep. But I got my undergrad in special education, autism in children. And I used to remember sitting up at night while he was awake, reading through my articles and studying and writing dissertations and God knows what assignments. But he was always my muse. He was always a really happy kid. He would be described as an angel or ghost baby. Sometimes you hear the terminology. But he, is one of the happiest kids ever. Like, he really is a genuinely happy, very positive child. For a 16-year-old especially, because you're expecting all the hormones and everything to be coming in now, and arguments and all of that kind of thing. We don't really have any of that. He's such a good kid. But what we have learned over the years is to really embrace the positive sides of autism and what that means. And when Luke's siblings came along, I have another I have a 13-year-old son who would be considered neurotypical, and my daughter is just after turning 11, and she is, I would definitely think, neurodivergent, like myself. So, we're learning a lot from each other. They're very different, but there's lots of different things that we've done over the years that have proven to be good, some not so good. We ended up getting a service dog, and that proved to be amazing for my son in terms of intervention, because it kind of resolved a lot of issues like bolting behaviors in public and sensory kind of triggers he would be able to focus more on the dog than everything else going on in the environment. So it proved to be really good. And all of these kind of foundations that we laid at the very beginning meant that he was able to finally attend things like getting a haircut, going to the dentist. These are all things that are really difficult for parents to really understand, how to get out there into the community. And the more support we can have in the beginning allows us to really become empowered in that role as a parent. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today. And this is him now at 16. He's my absolute heart walking around outside my body. He's absolutely incredible. As are my 3 kids. Obviously I'm biased, but so my agenda for today then is to talk through really what is autism and what that experience means for a family as well, to have an autistic child in that family dynamic. We're going to look at the pathways to diagnosis, and then all of the different professionals involved in the assessment. We'll look at the diversity and strengths of autism, and then supportive communities, so how we can kind of move forward with innovation and how we provide that level of comfort, I suppose, in the conversations we have in supporting parents as well. And I'm going to talk about some of my own research. Just last year, throughout COVID, I had surveyed 75 families on the lived experience of having a child with autism. So I will talk about some of the results that I gained insights into over that time as well. So basically, we have lots to get through, so I'm just going to get stuck in, okay? So autism is a lifelong developmental disability or difference, which relates to how a person communicates and interacts with others and how they experience the world around them. This is currently, there's no current biological way to test autism. There is no blood test, genetic screen or scan. Clinicians use diagnostic criteria or a checklist of observable traits or characteristics to determine if a child is autistic. And these levels of criteria have changed over time based on a growing understanding of autism. So you might have heard a number of years ago that, or you still hear today actually with a lot of people, that, rating a person as having mild autism or moderate autism or severe autism. I'll talk about the language a bit more in a minute, but it's kind of like thinking about the world being flat. Like we've really evolved from that terminology and how we understand what it means to be autistic. So actually the autism spectrum, there are actually multiple spectra. It's not just one spectrum. But for a diagnostician to come in and assess for an autism spectrum condition, a person would need to have marked differences in these areas. So social imagination, sensory processing, social interaction, and communication. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition outlines the diagnostic criteria for the assessment and diagnosis of a variety of differences, disabilities, and also mental health conditions. And this is the criteria the assessment team will use in the process of seeking an autism diagnosis. So they will look for things like social communication, interaction coupled with restricted or repetitive patterns of behavior and interests or activities. So there are also, autism is part of a broader neurodiversity family of differences or disabilities, which encompasses people with conditions or differences such as ADHD, dyslexia and dyspraxia, epilepsy, Tourette syndrome, dyscalculia, and these these are all kind of different ways of thinking about processing and understanding the world. And all of these are referred to as neurotypes. So people who have these differences in thinking are said to be neurodivergent. And as their way of thinking and processing the world can diverge from what society expects, whereas people who have these differences are said to be neurotypical. So while autistic people are born autistic, it is not something that parents learn when their child is born. So as a child grows up, they may begin to communicate differently to other people, find day-to-day situations stressful or overwhelming, and rely on structure and routine in order to manage. So this in turn may lead to a person receiving an autism diagnosis and possibly a co-occurring condition such as one of these that I've mentioned. So what we look at generally now is the level of support that a child will need. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with the access and inclusion model in early years, and they also look at levels of support in the context of children with additional needs. I think theirs is levels 1 to 7, but on the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, 5th edition, there are 3 categories of support. So we would have level 1 support, level 2, which would be substantial support, and level 3, very substantial levels of support. So just to show in context the amount of people that actually have an autism diagnosis in Ireland, 1 in 65 people. And there's actually a huge amount of people that are walking around undiagnosed, and that have kind of fallen through the cracks, if you will, while going through school, or just haven't, we haven't picked up on things as a result of being well able to mask the differences that they have amongst their peer group or their family, or just kind of going along with things and not really expressing how they're feeling, or maybe not recognizing how they're actually feeling, and understanding the world to be different to anybody else. So the language that we hear, language to use, we hear different types from the community. What has been proven to be the most, I suppose, popular at the moment would be the identity first language. And identity first language is basically autistic, saying someone is autistic, so he, she, or they are autistic. It is identity first, and it is preferred by the vast majority of autistics. So you should default to this if possible. Autism is part of us. It's not something that can be left at home. If you remove their autism, you remove all of them. So they would be an entirely different person if they weren't autistic. So think about it. Would you refer to a gay person as having gayness? No, you wouldn't. You would simply call them gay. And this is because being gay or being autistic is an intrinsic part of who they are. It's not a bad thing and does not need to be changed. Okay. It is okay to use the word autistic. Autism is not a dirty word, so please don't be shy around addressing it. And also, a minority of autistics do prefer person first language, so that if in doubt, it's best just to ask the person themselves. They don't bite. But so language to use, like if we were to use person first language, it would be person with autism, and you still hear people kind of reverting back to that. So one of the biggest arguments against person first language is that it separates people from their disability, which often is central to their life experience. So sometimes you can hear people talk about explaining a child as being a little bit different, a little bit quirky. And then there are other children who would kind of present as more obviously autistic. And usually you would hear that a lot with male children, kind of their sensory self-regulation would be more obvious to people around them, whereas girls would have more of a tendency to camouflage those behaviors that they might have, or they might just be well able to, it's like a chameleon like quality where they can blend into the environment more, whereas boys are very obviously autistic in a lot of cases. That's not to say every boy, I'm just giving an example that the majority of the research that's coming out would suggest that girls have more of a tendency to be able to camouflage. And then terms like tragically autistic, which is just awful. It's so negative. So we don't want to, fall into that kind of terminology. It's just, like for parents particularly, these words can be very hurtful, and our words really do matter. So when we're talking about an autistic person, it's important to understand what exactly that means for the lived experience. So autistics see and experience the world differently. There may be many traits of being autistic. So that can include sensory profiles, social interactions, behaviors, intense interests, and communication methods. So just to give a whistle-stop tour of assessment. So before an intervention support plan is developed, a holistic view of a child or young person is needed. Okay, so to explore an assessment for autism should involve several components, as autism is a lifelong neurodevelopmental disability and will present throughout life. It is important that the assessing clinicians interview those who know or who knew your child when they were young. Most clinicians ask what your child was like around their 5th birthday, and they might ask about your child's life and any mental health concerns, their learning needs, medical history, about significant life events. The clinician will always kind of want to spend time with the child being assessed and get to know them. And then to see what autistic traits a child might have. So they should observe how they might react to different situations and will likely use a standardized test or tool to help them with this. So the clinician will ask the child to talk on certain topics, to do puzzles or to play games with them. And then for an older child, they will likely ask questions about their own experience of autistic traits and their own understanding of self. So there are some benefits to getting assessed for autism. Like it can happen from any stage, usually from around, say, 18 months up until adulthood. There are still people in their 70s getting diagnosed, believe it or not. So there are, gaining clarity on something you're unsure of, gaining a better understanding of yourself or your child, gaining a better understanding of individual strengths, differences and needs, and then accessing autism or disability specific supports and service. So these are the main reasons, and some parents can shy away from the assessment stage because they haven't reached that stage of acceptance that something isn't quite right, and that not that it's not quite right, but it's not fitting the neurotypical way of moving through the system, whether it's the health system or the school system or even just being in the community. You're just marked differences in the way that a child might be developing. So in Ireland, there are different assessment routes. Two in particular, like if you were to look at it from a very high level, there's the public route and then there's the private route. So we can apply directly to the early intervention team and school teams. The HSE has local teams supporting children across Ireland. And each of these teams supports children with different levels and types of needs. And these teams are usually primary care, child and adolescent mental health, such as CAMS, early intervention team, and then the school age disability team. So the teams that assess for autism, as well as other complex developmental needs, are typically called the early intervention team for children 0 to 6, and then the school age disability team for children 6 to 18. So although the HSE are moving towards all disability services being provided in the same way nationally, this is through a plan called Progressing Disability Services, and there are still regional variations depending where you're living. So I know from my own experience, the assessment route, we went through the assessment of need, but we also, because of the waiting lists that we went through, we really needed to go privately to speed things up, just so we could get an educational placement for my son, particularly in the early years, because everyone was saying to me, oh, early intervention is the way to go. You have to get him into an early intervention spot. You're wasting time. And that panic that kind of bubbles up inside you as a parent It's awful, it really is, and you're not sure where to go. And I know you guys will be talking to parents in that kind of situation where this is a whole new world for them. They're really trying to navigate what is happening for their child, and on a personal level, how they parent, but also navigate the services that are out there. And it can be very, very difficult. It's very taxing on our mental health as a parent as well. So the support needs to be there in these years. I can't tell you how detrimental it is. Even from my own experience, but also from all the parents I've ever known, they've had difficulty at some point of their child's life in securing the correct services, whether it comes to education or therapeutic services or diagnostic services. So how do I get a diagnosis through the early intervention or school age team? So you might be asked some of these questions by parents. So to request an assessment or therapy services from the early intervention or school age team, you need a referral from a healthcare professional, for example, your public health nurse, your general practitioner, an occupational therapist, or a speech and language therapist. So if the early intervention or school age team accepts the referral, for example, if they agree that your child is showing significant and complex difficulties in more than one area of functioning, you will be put on a waiting list for an assessment with that team. But unfortunately, which I'm sure you're more than informed about, that services can be very stretched at present, and that's probably an understatement, and the waiting time is likely to be long. So a lot of parents are pushed into the private sector, and that can be very taxing in terms of financial strain that's put on a family unit. And a lot of these parents are trying to kind of establish that role of carer, which is a whole different ball game. So many people will have to give up their full-time job to become a full-time carer, and they have a significant decline in their income, and yet the requirement for them to be able to support their child in a private sector way increases the level of demand for funding at that point in time. So it can be really stressful. So as mentioned previously, your child may be waiting up to 3 years to get an assessment of autism. So sometimes children may age out of the team that they're in, which certainly happened for my son. He was almost 5 when he finally got to the stage of meeting a clinical psychologist. And you need that clinical psychologist report in order to be able to apply for an autism specific placement in a school, which I'm hoping the systems are kind of gearing towards a more inclusive model, and I think they are in most instances, but you still hear the odd story where the school place is just not going to be suitable as a result of the report not matching what the school can actually provide for the child. And that can happen in early years as well. So another option then will be to apply for an assessment of needs. So in order, you can apply for this if your child was born after the 1st of June 2002 and you feel they have a disability. Autism is classified as a disability, although some autistic adults might tell you that it's not a disability, it's it's a different style of lived experience, but it depends on the person. Every single person has challenges. It is a social disability in that society is not set up for a neurodivergent person to navigate through life seamlessly. There's lots and lots of barriers up there, which is why As I Am really needs to work at kicking down the barriers so we can get children into the right placement in preschools, children into the right placement in school, university, and then moving on to the workplace as well. So we're trying to shift the narrative a little bit. So the aim of the assessment is to assess and identify the health and educational needs of an individual. So prior to February 2020, an assessment of need could lead to an official diagnostic assessment of autism if indicated. However, Under the new assessment of need guidelines, children going forward will receive a brief preliminary team assessment and not a diagnostic assessment. So that might be important to mention to your parents if they are asking you specifically about the routes for assessment. So your child could not be given a diagnosis of autism following this initial brief assessment alone. It's more like a screening tool, I think, rather than a diagnostic process. Now, when we were going through it, 11 years ago, it was a diagnostic tool, and you had the full multidisciplinary team, but they have changed the route now significantly. However, if concerns are raised during this time, your child would be put on a separate second waiting list with your local early intervention and school age disability teams. So then you have your private route. Okay, the two previous were public route. The private route is where some parents also access autism assessments privately. So your first step would be to contact your local GP or public health nurse for a referral letter. A lot of private assessors will require one, while others don't. So it's a bit more, it's less of a monopoly, I suppose, when it comes to the private sector. But it is better to have a referral letter for your child in case they do need one. So private assessments can be very expensive. So we would advise people to really kind of shop around and do your research before going through the process, because some are absolutely colossal costs and some are, manageable. So they can really vary depending on the practice and the clinical professional. This is due to the in-depth nature of these assessments and the detail that is necessary in the final report. So your child will be usually seen by a multidisciplinary team, which would include a psychologist, a speech and language therapist, and an occupational therapist. So in some areas, applying for the assessment of need may result in a child being seen sooner than a referral to the early intervention or school age team. But then in other areas, the assessment of need and early intervention school age team waiting lists are merged, and then there is no benefit to applying for both. So it's difficult to kind of understand how the lists are working unless you have someone who's just been through it. So you can talk to your GP or public health nurse about whether applying for both is necessary or needed for where you live. It's a bit of a postcode lottery, unfortunately, but on balance, it is recommended that you apply for both. So some parents also access we would recommend actually contacting a few different organizations just to check on the pricing, as I said, so they can vary from one to another. And different clinics will also have different waiting times. It is important to be aware that to access HSE services in the future, the private assessment and reports need to include specific areas. So just make sure that the parent is checking on the criteria and that is required by the health service. So if accessing a private assessment, find out beforehand if your child's report will include the following. So a cognitive or developmental assessment, and this is particularly important in Dublin, where often access to services depends on it. And then if the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, or the ADOS assessment, is undertaken in a multidisciplinary way. And then also if the report will include a detailed parent interview, such as the Autism Diagnostic Interview Revised, or ADDR, or Diagnostic Interview for Social and Communication Disorders, known as DISCO. So another lot of questions you might be asked from parents is, what can they expect from the assessment process? So it's important to know the members of the multidisciplinary team. So you can encounter, sometimes there's a full team, sometimes it's just one or two professionals. But autism assessments usually involve at least one clinician with relevant training and expert knowledge, for example, a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist. And then teams of clinicians, including psychiatrists, psychologists, speech and language therapists and or occupational therapists can work together to complete an assessment. So these are called multidisciplinary teams, or MDTs, and there is currently no biological way, as I said, to test for autism. So there's no blood test or genetic screening. You may be recommended to go for a genetic screening if it is suspected that there may be a Fragile X diagnosis, for example, which would be a genetic condition, and that can represent very much like the same profile. It is included on the autism spectrum. And these criteria have changed over time based on the growing understanding of autism. Like I said, if you think about the world being flat, we've moved on quite a bit from that stage. So unfortunately, family-centered practice is not proven to be at the forefront of the lived experience for autism families. And there is a very negative narrative involved for autism families that is not present in the same respect for families of children who are non-autistic. So some families experience this negativity more intensely than others. And then participants in this research, this was my dissertation, which was all about the lived experience, where they all spoke about how there was a lack of understanding in terms of their support needs and the needs of their family. And this impacts directly on the rights of a child and on the child's holistic development. So their overall, it can be down to how they communicate, how they understand their sensory systems, how a parent understands a child's behavior. If that support is there, the child is going to do much better out in the community, accessing services and really participating in the the services that are provided. So there's definitely further study needed into the mental health supports for the primary and secondary carers, also for siblings and for grandparents. And I'll explain a bit more about that in a few minutes. But the social isolation for these families and their individual members is a source of concern and should be examined further, really. Participants in this particular study that I did identified a need for sibling intervention, particularly with families of autistic children with high needs. So they would be level 3 autistic children. And the focus of support structures should provide the whole family with tailored service provision to enable the family to care for the autistic child. So, family-centered practice really needs to be, progressed a lot further, and really involve the parents. Instead of instructing parents what they should and shouldn't do, find out where the parents are at in their journey. Have they accepted the diagnosis for their child? Are they willing and open to the discussion about what their child's needs are, or do they need a little bit more time to process what's actually happening? And then the look at the medical staff, or anyone they encounter, really, have they got the training to work with autistic children? Do they understand autism themselves? Have they got the training to interact with a family that are going through different stages of assessments? There is the Informing Families .ie, even the PEIN network. All of those things need to be really considered, looking at trauma and how families really are impacted by society when they have a child with additional needs. But because the child in this instance is autistic, it is an invisible condition, and they can meet barriers out in society that not necessarily everyone will understand. So if there is a level of understanding amongst the practitioners, it makes things so much easier, and families are more likely to reach out and ask the question and look for support. We want to empower parents to really look at what their child needs, instead of them shying away and feeling embarrassed and mortified that their child is behaving in a certain way, and they can't explain why. So really knowing how to engage with the child, being as predictable and autonomous as possible for the parents, really, to understand where to go next and have a real explainer of the journey. And then being able to trust people with things that might feel like you're bearing your soul and you're open to judgment. It can be a tough place to be. So having that level of support is really important. And then parents' health and well-being as well should be at the forefront, as sometimes it's a 24-hour job if you have a child with a sleep disorder, if you have a child with very high needs in terms of sensory regulation. There's lots of different elements that can come into play. So really looking at the individual family unit and understanding where they are, you know, really challenged by the fact that there is a lack of support, and what they can do next. So what to expect from an assessment for a family. Clinicians are really looking to see, are there current and past difficulties with social communication? They're looking for, are there restricted or repetitive behaviours or interests? And then is there a difference in sensory experience of the world? And they really find that through the things like there's not diagnostic, but there's tools like the routines-based interview, where they can have a conversation with the parent and really go down through, from the minute they wake up in the morning, what they find to be the most difficult part of their day. Where is their child really struggling? And then it could be like, I remember explicitly having to teach my son how to get dressed, for instance, or, you know, how to structure a sentence when he wanted to request something. And you really have to, as a parent of an autistic child, delve into those minute moments in your interaction and really look at what we usually look through. So it's important that we can really look at the lived experience of the autism family, and I really believe that this holds the key to best practice in family-centred intervention. Government policies and legal and health structures shape the Irish autism family lived experience through interactions with frontline services. So everyone they meet really has an impact on how they are empowered within our communities. So the implementation of these structures impacts directly on the areas of education, social and healthcare, and then cascading further to influence schools and local communities, and then the family unit, and most importantly, the individual child's development. So the research in this area is limited in exploring the lived experience from the perspective of the autistic person and their family. And these are particular transition points where we need, as autistic advocates, to really look at the different levels of support that are required. So time leading up to diagnosis, if a parent has any doubt in their mind whether their child is autistic or not, believe me, you do a dance with yourself where it's like, oh, yes, I think they are. No, actually, they're fine today, they're not. And you really kind of scale it back, and then some days you find it so difficult and you're like, no, I'm marching up to the GP's office now and I'm going to get that form and I have to understand what's going on. But you do have a lull, and you know, you have easier days and then you have hard days. It's never the same day twice in an autistic household, believe me. And then if there are anything like a family crisis or at the actual time of diagnosis, a lot of parents express relief that, oh, I knew it. I knew it was something. I knew it was autism. I knew it was ADHD, whatever it might be. They have suspected this for a long time. And when we think about the mother and child, or the father and child bonding, like the experience we have and that we expect to have with our children is completely turned on its head. You know, it's different. We really have to work at synchronizing ourselves with our children. So the whole point is that we need someone to really listen and tell us that we're doing a good job, that we know what we're doing, and there is no professional that's ever going to interact with us that knows our child better than we do. And I think that's an integral part of empowering parents, to realize that they are the experts in their child, and at all of these transition points they can really do so much off their own knowledge that they probably would be doubting themselves about. But if they were a little bit more confident, if they had more feedback, if they had someone telling them or asking them for advice as opposed to telling them what to do, if that makes sense. So, that movement from the home into preschool, or from preschool into primary school, whatever it might be, is a huge moment in the life of a family with an autistic child. And remember that there is a huge impact of the diagnosis. Even if a person is relieved, they still have to go through a process of acceptance that this has actually happened, and they're kind of processing for a while. It might be like 2 months, it might be 6 months, it might be a year, it might be 5 years before the penny drops and you go, okay, this is my life now. I have to accept this and embrace the strengths that we have and move forward. But as a parent, you're constantly being bombarded with societal kind of expectations and demands. And when it comes to interactions with teachers or preschool, support workers, care staff, you need to have a good relationship and be able to say what's going on, be able to ask questions. Transparency is key. But when a child or young person receives a diagnosis of autism, it is paramount that there is balance between the individual needs and the needs of the family as well. So this process has a significant emotional impact on the parent, as it requires them to place their child's developmental differences under a microscope. So requesting them to compare their needs to that of a typically developing child of the same age, which is traumatizing when you think about it. You're basically showing where your child is not on par with another child. Like, we should never compare children. All children develop at different rates at different times. There should always be an element of individuality to these diagnoses and assessments, and even just having a conversation and accept that people are different. I'm really passionate about parent synchrony, parent and child synchrony, which Ruth Feldman has some lovely papers on. If anyone is interested in looking it up, I can send on any information if you're interested. But it's all about how we develop our social relationship as the child matures from newborn into adolescent. And synchrony can be affected by the condition of the mother. So, for example, if a parent is experiencing postnatal depression or has high levels of anxiety, or if the child has a neurological condition causing differences in social learning, which can make the parent lose confidence in their parenting ability, and also the child loses confidence in their social ability. So it can be a double-edged sword there, and there can be trauma caused by that disconnect. So we have to work really hard in those little moments of engagement. But communication between family members is essential if they are to strive to achieve a goal of balance. And Article 23 of the United Nations Committee of the Rights of the Child holds that the recognition of inherent dignity and of equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. And if we really think about that, like, the family unit is the forefront of support and our network that we need in order for a child to really excel throughout the lifespan. So some of you may have heard of this before, but it's the ecological systems theory by Bronfenbrenner, and I know it's from 1979, but by God, does it make sense when you put things into context. So we have lots of different systems at play in any society. So our macro system looks at how legislation impacts the family unit, our ideologies as Irish people, our social class system, and then looking at extended family, school boards and neighbourhoods, attitudes, and all of this can be barriers to how a family are actually included and how they are supported. And then also looking at the actual neighbourhood, the doctor's office, are they accepting of Sorry, I'm just checking the chat here. Okay, grand. So a child does not exist in a vacuum. There are so many different moving parts in a child's life, and therefore it is complicated providing support to any child. You're never going to have all of the answers, and these things really do take time. It does not matter how many A to Z degrees and qualifications you have. The core element of support is getting to know the child and their strengths. From there, we discover our building blocks and we find the specific areas a child needs our support in. We need a decent understanding of the core components of an autism diagnosis, but what we really need is an awareness of basic human needs here. Okay, so imagine starting afresh and being brought into a new role, say in a job in Latvia tomorrow morning. Can you communicate? Can you order lunch? Can you pay a bill? Can you ask for a drink? The reality is it's going to take time to learn a new way to interact. And in many cases with autistic children, and the communication with their own body has its challenges. So identifying and understanding feelings and emotions and communicating these things to others is one of the biggest obstacles. So for parents, knowing the role of an autism parent is stressful does not tell us what the role actually is. I mean, lots of people know that being a parent to an autistic child is stressful, but there can be a stigma attached to the role of an autism carer, and that's proven in the research. And studies have demonstrated that parents and carers can feel blamed for the behaviour of their child, and they feel socially isolated and ostracized from their communities, suffering from low self-esteem and weaker psychological health compared to parents of children with other disabilities. And the negative implications of stigma can significantly reduce self-confidence and parenting ability and mental health and well-being of the carer. So self-stigma is a phenomenon that is discussed in lots of recent studies relating to autism carers, and recounts the carer adapting the public perceptions of negative stereotypes as part of their personal identity. So participants in this study expressed feelings of isolation and desperation at times. Several participants stated that they felt completely alone in their parenthood, as no other parent could understand their family circumstances. But also on the flip side, the topic of joy in parenting, which is not really documented as much. Typically, the joy of parenting, typically developing children, is a natural subject for discussion, obviously. So celebration of milestones, shared social interactions. Studies have provided accounts from autistic children and their parents that describe intense feeling of happiness and joy in engagement and interactions. And there are minuscule, sometimes fleeting moments that produce immense feelings of elation in the achievement of skills. For example, saying a word in context, holding a pen appropriately, achieving independence. We really celebrate the small things in life, and it's so important that that's recognized, and there is so much joy to be had throughout the daily lived experience with an autism family. And we really do look at the small moments, and they are the big moments, really. And many of these things are taken for granted in neurotypical households. So for autistic children and their families, there is joy in the details of the lived experience. And I can't really speak about the autism family without mentioning the amazing role of the siblings. So the sibling of an autistic child has a highly influential impact on the family's lived experience. So the overall family, not just on the autistic child. So experiences of stressors and relationships were also reported, including embarrassing moments in the presence of their peer group and coping with reactions of peers to their autistic sibling. Worry about the future, parental favoritism, feelings of rejection by parents. They were identified that siblings can be influential lifelong teachers in an autistic child's life, and there is an inherent motive to help their sibling as opposed to any other peer group. And there are many naturally occurring interactions with sibling relationships that can encourage generalization of social and communication skills, their reliance on one another, and that, you know, this can be strengthened, and particularly when parents are unavailable or preoccupied, which can happen when it comes to appointments and, you know, the level of care that a child might need. But particularly the research says that sisters may fall into the role of caretaker, and this finding verifies that the inclusion of siblings in therapies and interventions will be highly beneficial for the family unit, as this can encourage collaboration and sharing of responsibilities. So there's also a need for parental expectations of a sibling, you know, a need to look at it, to really assess what is expected of a child in a sibling role, as they can feel burdened or overwhelmed by caretaking. A careful balance should be sought, you know, the goal is acceptable balance among component parts of the family, and this can be the main objective for a family unit. So siblings adapt to the family situation with kind of a make-do attitude and tend to spend more time with their father as a substitute for lack of time with their mother because of preoccupation with the needs of a disabled sibling. So the need to assess the well-being of siblings and the importance of their mental health is really inherent now in the research that's coming out. Other themes that were identified were communication challenges of understanding and expression, coping strategies for communication breakdown and behaviours, and an emotional reaction to interactions with their siblings and family. So I have now been talking for 52 minutes. I have only a few slides left, but just to talk a little bit more about the home life, because I really feel like you guys will be interacting in a very I suppose what's the word, the hub of a family is the home, obviously. So from the parents that I surveyed last year, I had 75 out of 72 confirming that it is different parenting and caring for an autistic child than parenting a typically developing child. The other 3 couldn't comment, as all of their children were autistic, and they had no personal comparison. So the answers from respondents really revealed high levels of stress in daily care due to differences in behaviour and communication that were reported by the majority. So respondents mentioned several times the need to be constantly supervising their child, to be always on, and 24-hour supervision is required in many cases. The preferences for sameness, sensory sensitivities, and communication differences were the most common answers explaining the differences in being a parent to an autistic child. And also, talking about the family unit, I cannot not talk about the grandparents' role. So grandparents of autistic children, in comparison to grandparents of children with other disabilities, have distinct differences in the stressors they experience. So these stressors are related to worry regarding their grandchild's varying degrees of behaviour and communication differences. Grandparents undergo feelings of sadness, frustration, and disillusionment because of their grandchild's diagnosis, and may experience feelings of isolation also due to fear of unpredictability of the child's behaviour in public. Grandparents may have a stronger relationship with their grandchild due to increased involvement, as they often provide parents of autistic children with emotional and financial support. And Green 2001 states that parents, as grandparents are secondary caregivers, contribute to, parents' overall well-being. So parents of autistic children are commonly reported to go through divorce, depression, and financial hardship, and depending on the dynamics of the family relationships, grandparents can be met with barriers to providing support to their children and to their grandchildren. So grandparents may find themselves in a state of confusion whilst trying to understand their grandchild's behaviours and communication differences. And there may also be feelings of resentment regarding caregiving, as grandparents may be providing the only respite to parents, resulting in a loss of freedom and potentially financial stress due to reduction in the capacity to earn. So yes, it is quite a difficult relationship to have, but at the same time, there's so many positives to take from home life as well. A relationship with an autistic child, regardless of being with a parent, sibling, grandparent, or extended family member, is joyous, it's rich, and it's fulfilling. And this is just a quote from Myers et al. 2009, and it's so lovely. He has made us see the light and reprioritize. Things we used to think were important are no longer important. Our goals are no longer career oriented. We enjoy life a little more. Our biggest priorities are being happy, having fun, and doing whatever it takes to make sure that he will be a self-happy and sufficient adult. I think still have a couple of minutes left. So the family of an autistic child or young person is first and foremost a family, and an understanding of how a family is constructed is essential. So Bowen established a model called family systems theory. Some of you might be familiar with it already, but this is whereby a family is considered a system that is defined by trends of emotional interactions passed through generations. So how we parent is really based on how our parents parented us. So we pass down these kind of traits as in our role of parenthood. So concepts that underpin Bowen's model of family systems theory include different types of boundaries, being able to differentiate ourselves from our families. As a carer, sometimes you become immersed in the role of carer, and it can be quite difficult to identify who you are as a person as opposed to a carer to someone. And you can say the same for motherhood in that type of context as well. But in terms of caretaking, the level of burnout is just like, it's unimaginable, really. I don't think there is a way to actually measure that. And if there is, I think it is something that should be looked at, and I'm sure it has been looked at in the research. But the type of boundaries evident within family systems will indicate the impact of an intervention, and may have from external systems of support. So for instance, if a speech therapist calls out to a family's home and the parents aren't willing to accept that the child has a speech difficulty, they're not going to take in what the speech therapist is saying. So, they might have particularly rigid boundaries. They're really under involved in that relationship with the speech therapist. And also they're not attuned to the needs of the child. So it may take them a little bit longer to get through that part of their acceptance of a diagnosis. So family members, because of blurred boundaries, may decide to disengage from interventions offered by systems outside of the family unit or from the family unit itself, as they are in a state of denial with their circumstances. So it can be quite a stressful time trying to figure out, whether they can trust people or allow them into their kind of methods of support, if you like. But it is important to note that there are so many strengths that come with having a neurodivergent child. They have different ways of thinking, different communication, different experiences, different strengths, and different learnings. And this is just an example of how, developing strengths can really, or honing in on things like special interests can make such a difference. So this is my son's lovely artwork. He started off around 8 years old, drawing faces everywhere. He was finally at a stage where he could regulate his sensory systems, and he started drawing these literally on every surface he could find. He then progressed into drawing full scenes from the Cars movie in Pixar, all of that kind of stuff. Then he went on to movie logos, and he had all freehand, nothing to copy from, all of that. So hyperfocus is when we have the ability to intensely focus all of our energy and power into one specific task. Usually this needs to be something that greatly interests us also. So when we are in hyper focus mode, we may not take the time to eat, drink, or go to the bathroom. We are so intensely focused on this one thing that we love that we forget to take breaks. And this is when it is useful to have someone to remind us to take breaks, or oftentimes autistics will set alarms on their phones to remind them to do things for themselves. So, and then there's the specialized interest or intense interest, often referred to as SPINs by the autistic population. So this is a topic or area or thing that are intensely interested in, and often the subject of our hyper focus. Some autistics don't like to use the word special here because it's like special needs, and it's kind of infantilizing the autistic experience. So autistics need to be very knowledgeable in their interests, not necessarily because they are highly intelligent, but more because they have simply put so much time and energy into it. Some special interests stay for life, while others change after days, weeks, months, and years. Also, some autistics don't have SPINs at all, so it's not something that can be easily defined. So just to say,
sorry, Zara, I'm just time is almost up.
Okay, two slides left.
Grant.
Is that okay? Okay.
No, that's fine. It's very interesting. I hate to stop you, but
it's okay.
There are questions.
Great, yeah. So it's literally just that autistic people learn scientifically what non-autistic people learn instinctively, and it's just to be aware of that. And then there is diversity in each family dynamic, be it in variation of parenting style, children's additional needs, home environments, financial circumstances, educational achievements, and social class. A one-size-fits-all system does not exist, and therefore an understanding of complexities, of inequities in barriers to service provision are a significant inheritance for parents and children with additional needs. So I will end on embrace the diversity of a family unit, and let's show them their strength and not their deficit. So thank you, guys. I will open the floor to questions.
Yeah, well, I suppose the first question is to say thank you very much. That was brilliant, really interesting. Are you happy for us to share your presentation?
Of course, that's no problem at all.
And Zara has said if we don't get around to all your questions, her contact details are there, and feel free to contact her. The other piece is Michelle put in the link around the booklet from As I Am, so feel free to ask for that. Now, I just hope, Michelle, keep me on track in terms of all the questions. I suppose one of the first was about, and again, put up your hands if you want to say something, but I'm going to go through what's in the chat first.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first question is, what does a parent, and you may have answered this, need to look for when going through a private sector for assessment? They can go to any specialist or just specific ones. That was from Diana.
Right. Thanks, Diana, for the question. I would say, I think I mentioned it quite a bit already about shopping around, that it's just so important that we really look and do our research around the practitioners we're going to bare our soul to, basically, that there's so much emotional kind of investments that we have to put into the process, that you need to know that you can trust the person, and that you can have some level of what's the word,
Assurance.
that you can trust the process. Insurance, yeah, that you can prepare yourself, and there's support afterwards as well. That's important too. So definitely look into it.
Okay, and the other thing is parents report incredibly, as you mentioned in your case, long waiting lists when they're accepted into a service they're in the first place. And sometimes they can be signposted to a parenting course, which they can find upsetting. And once again, they're on a diagnosis, they're again on a significant wait list for intervention, and they can report feeling overwhelmed, isolated, and struggling with their own mental health. And I feel support groups are an essential support for parents. And there's kind of been quite a bit of talk in the chat about support groups. So what's your view on that?
So it depends on the parent, I would say. I know my experience of support groups has been quite varied. There are some that have been absolutely fantastic, you know, in the early years, and some that have been quite scarring, to be honest. Because there are a lot of traumatized parents out there, and you really just have to realize your own kind of boundaries and not really get involved in other people's trauma as well. You know, it kind of adds to your stress levels. I know that I personally would take on other people's stress. I think that would be part of my neurodivergence, but I know a lot of people would be very empathic as well. So it is important to protect yourself emotionally, I think, from other people's trauma. So just to be aware of that if you are going to support group. Yeah,
that's brilliant advice, actually. Thank you. I think we all need that.
Yeah.
And as a parent, what is the best response you've gotten from a professional when you raised your concerns or verbalized your experiences?
Honest to God, the best response is someone just listening and not telling me what to do. Because honestly, the confidence you feel in that someone has heard you and accepts what you've said, and that you actually feel more empowered by just someone listening to the fact that you've had a tough day, and that you will fix it tomorrow, or tomorrow will be a better day. And these are all things that you know already, but just a sounding board for someone to tell you you're doing a good job. You know, that's all you really need. It's all about parent empowerment at the end of the day. It's not about telling us what you've, you know, found in a quantitative study about autistic people. It's more about that human piece and how to be more family centered. And I firmly believe that.
And I suppose somebody mentioned to thank you for mentioning siblings because of their importance in the scheme. And again, I suppose in terms of supports out there for siblings, how would you feel? Are they recognised? Do they get supports? What's
Not
there
enough.
for them?
Definitely not enough. I know in As I Am we have a number of sibling groups coming up. They're in the pipeline, but I think they're not normally recognised as participants in the research, or even, you know, that they are the most you know, important relationship a child will ever have. They live longer than a parent. You know, they're around for your whole life. You will have your sibling. That's the longest relationship you'll ever have, basically. So I think they should be an integral part of any intervention, and it should be looking at the context rather than just the individual child, because no one exists in a vacuum. So
brilliant. Actually, that's really, I was there going, surely they're not more important than parents, but actually I can see your point, particularly for you know, parents do usually die before their children. So I think,
and the thing is, a lot of siblings will take over the role as primary care afterwards. You know, so it is important.
It's very important. And the other question from Susan: what is the best language to use for a 10-year-old who has just started the assessment journey, and how much information should they be given? And I suppose if you can even put that at all stages of life, I think it will be important of the child's life. Like, how do you communicate and tell them and help them understand?
So I think we have to start with strength in that case. So look at what the 10-year-old is really interested in, look at what they're good at, promote it from there, and let them identify themselves with other autistic individuals in out there, in whether it's in the media or maybe a friend who might be autistic, and build those connections of positivity before starting the conversation. I really believe there has to be examples out there for them to understand. And if there isn't, there's loads of books, there's lots of things that can start that conversation in a child-friendly way. It doesn't have to be sitting down with the DSM-5 and going, right, this is it now. You know, it has to be really person-centered. Like, look at their personality, look at how funny they are, look at what their talents are, you know, and build it from there. It doesn't have to be straight in talking about diagnosis. I think that medical language does not need to be introduced to a 10-year-old. It just needs to be a comforting conversation that difference is a positive thing.
And I suppose the point is that assessment isn't going to come out of the blue. It's going to be part of a journey, and the conversation leading up to the decision to go for an assessment, particularly if a child is a 10-year-old, really they should be involved in, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then from Katrina, parents who come from other countries often go to their home country for a diagnosis. Is that accepted by the HSE?
That's a good question. I suppose it depends on the practitioner and the system that they're using. I don't know about private diagnostics, but it would be up to the HSE really to look at the individual reports. I couldn't answer that as a across the board answer, because it's very much up to the practitioner or the multidisciplinary team.
Yeah, and I'm on to 25 new messages. Just people be aware of that. So, Michelle, I know we need to go into breakout rooms. So
you're okay for about maybe one more question. All of those things that's in the chat now is not questions, Josephine. So
okay, well, I have a few more here. So
yeah, we still have a few more.
Them. Yeah. So what supports and training are available for parents? And we get this an awful lot because I know our home visiting provides some of that support for children under 3 for parents and families while they're waiting for assessments. And if early intervention is key, then this time is crucial for parents. Some parents I've spoken to feel the time is being wasted. And this is Karen talking.
This is part of the reason why I went and did a master's in early intervention, because no one was, and I did it quicker than I would have got support. And that'll tell you something. So, and I've 10 years studying, my son still doesn't have a full multidisciplinary team. So I think I am his best advocate. And I think knowledge is power for any parent. I really do believe that. My own journey has been really enriched by the fact that I read and I read and I read and I kept reading and I kept working at that engagement piece with my son. So I don't feel like there is any one course that a parent can do that's going to suit them. They have to understand their journey. So I would say to them to put their focus into their relationship with their child, synchronizing up with their needs, understanding their own needs and their own strengths, and look at it from that perspective, as opposed to signing up to a course blindly and being told how to parent. You know, I just don't, that's just my opinion, but I'm sure others have a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's where home visiting comes in, is they can tailor the support and they can put them to maybe a course that would actually fit. And I know we do a parenting course for children or for parents who are waiting for assessments, and it's actually been incredibly popular because it's tailored towards them and a lot of what you are saying. One of the questions here from Katrina is, does the HSE still provide the 7 weeks training for parents?
Which one? See, I've been around a while.
Katrina, do you want to answer that, because that was just the question?
Is it the Parent Plus?
I've no idea. It was just
Early Bird, maybe.
Katrina, are you on the, or is she gone?
I'd say it could be Parents Plus that she's talking about. I know when my kid was assessed that I had to attend. Had to.
The other one would be the Hannon program. That was
sorry. Here's Katrina.
Yes. Sorry.
Sorry, have I said your name wrong? It's probably Katerina, is it?
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah,
it's me.
Sorry. Sorry.
I just want to add,
that's my neurodiversity names.
I'm a mom as well of an autistic child, and I was going through training with HSE, but it was before all these pandemic problems. So basically we were going through, it was a program, maybe I'm not sure now, 7 weeks or 8 weeks with all these professionals, and they actually, it was very helpful. So that was my question, if they are still providing something like this or no. because it was really something good, some good tool, you know, for parents which didn't know anything about autism.
Mm-hmm. I remember going to the early bird training. Is that the one you're referring to?
I don't know. This was here in Longford, and it was with the stuff from HSC. So all these OTs, psychologists, all the team was there basically, and they provide like a really nice program for parents.
That sounds really good, and you're very
it was really
lucky to access something like that. Yeah, I know in my own experience, I remember doing the early bird program, and the most beneficial thing I found that came from it was actually the conversations with other parents, and making that connection. And I think I still talk to some of them now, like, you know, so it's nice to be able to attend these courses and build a rapport with people and feel accepted amongst your peer group and realize who your peer group are, because it's not always very kind of forthcoming as to who is in the same situation as you are. So I think the support groups are really they are important, you know, but it is just to be mindful as your child gets older and go through different kind of stages of development, that you do need to protect yourself emotionally from other people's difficulties.
Thank you.
Okay, so if Michelle,
I think
and we'll collate some of the questions and send them out, and we can send them out again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Sarah, just the last thing is some of the home visitors are asking, is there one book that you'd recommend for reading for just gaining more knowledge? Like, obviously not an academic one.
Not an academic one.
Yeah.
I have so many books.
Don't worry about it. I can email you later, and
I could send you a book list if you want.
Yeah, please do. Could you send me on the PowerPoint and the book list, and that would be brilliant for later.
Yeah, that's no problem at all.
Great.
Really enjoyed that, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Not at all. You're welcome. And I'll pass it over to Michelle now.
Brilliant. And Zara, just to say, everybody in the chat is, if you want to read through the chat at any stage, it's fantastic. All positive reviews for you. Thanks so much. So listen, thanks so much. I'm just going to share my screen. We're going to go into breakout rooms just to really get you really discussing what we were talking about there. We're going to give you, here, hold on, and I'll just share the screen, it'd be easier. So, of course, anybody that knows me knows I normally put team stuff together, and we're having breakout rooms today, and they're all in Halloween scary movies, hopefully teams. So take note of the team that you're put into, to the actual group that you're put into. And today we're going to be discussing, we're going to give you a case study. I'm going to put it up on screen now, and if some people can just screenshot it, that would be brilliant. But there is a facilitator in each of your rooms, and they have hold of the case study as well already, but just in case if anything goes awry. Okay, so we want you to discuss the scenario within the group. Obviously some of your programs, your policies and your procedures will be different, but we're just literally looking for the overall referral pathways. So it might be, well, we think the kids should go into speech and language therapy. We think, you know, the parents should be connected in with such and such. So it's not that you can say like, oh, well, we're not allowed to do that, or that's not within our remit. So it's just to think of the overall thing. Okay, so that's really it. And your facilitators in the groups know that they're going to take just bullet points of what you're saying, and they'll feed back into the big group. We're going to give you 15 minutes for this. It was 20, but sorry, the conversation was obviously really important there. So we'll give you 15 minutes, and this is the case study there. I'm not going to read it out now. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to take a shot of it, and then you can discuss it in your group. Basically, it's just a family. There is multiple supports needed, and what would you put into place? I'll give you 30 seconds to just take the screenshot, but as I said, they should, the facilitator in each group should take it, and then I'm going to pop you in, and we're going to give you 15 minutes. You'll get a minute at the end, just to say that you'll be getting pulled back out. Is that okay? Okay. Go on. Sorry, Josephine, go on.
Not at all. I said if it's most of what you probably do is start talking about Zara, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and that's
said.
okay. Yeah, because it's quite quick to actually figure out the pathways anyway. So just, you know, talk about like anything to do with neurodivergency at all. Okay, I'm going to pop you all in now, okay?
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Sarah, again. I should have thanked you again at the end.
I'll go into outer space now.
You'll be all going in, so just.
Sorry, I got no, I'm still
waiting until the 8th. I'm waiting until it's 2 seconds.
My group is very efficient.
Are they? Very good.
We would have loved to give you more, but we're conscious as well that we want to finish out one.
Yeah. Now the other thing I want to do, and I'm just going to share my screen very quickly, because just in case we don't get time for this at the end, is around what's coming up. So at the moment, what's coming up is on Friday, the 28th of October, there's a Car and What Works workshop. And we have asked the research team in Maynooth who are doing the national, who are doing the review on national home visiting services and I suppose recommendations for the future to come along. The Home Visiting Alliance will give you what we've done in terms of the feasibility study, and you'll have an opportunity to discuss such things as systemic challenges, as national oversight, program and community readiness, referral pathways, integration within existing services, home visitor employment and learning requirements. And that will be both online and in person. So we'll actually advertise that nearer to the date. And then after Christmas, on the 20th of January, Sonia Goulding is going to talk about self-care and professional boundaries, and that will build on from what Zara was saying about for parents the importance of boundaries. So before I stop sharing, we'll now get on to some feedback. And I'll start with Halloween. Who was Halloween?
I think I was. Yeah. So I'll just give a couple of points really. So what we really put in place.
If you actually, Louise, just give us 1 point because everybody wants to finish.
Mehel. We decided a Mehel would be a really good thing to do to get everyone on board and on the same page and around the same table.
Fantastic. Well done. We'll be delighted if I could see a lot of people smiling, because it's something that comes up all the time, but actually I think it is a fantastic thing.
Thank you.
The Addams family. And then the screen will be after the Addams family. Who's the Addams family?
Catherine, that was us, I think.
Okay, Dolores.
Catherine's going to feedback, I think.
You're on mute, Catherine, that's it. And because the screen, there's so many people, I can't see you. Catherine. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
No,
I was confused because I was in the Halloween room and flew out into another room. So
I won't ask if you're a witch and have a broomstick, but keep going.
Yeah, I did. I inferred that, didn't I? A good witch. Good witch. Okay. So we were all in agreement and we had numerous ones. We agreed the public health nurse would be the first
protocol.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you. Scream, and then the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah, so we actually said Mehel as well, but we're looking from the perspective of supporting the child. What we were saying was that and bring emotional books. We could create a morning routine. Morning seems to be a bit of a challenge for the family. So put it up on the fridge, a picture kind of morning routine to see would that actually aid their mornings and help them get to school on time.
Brilliant, well done. The Rocky Horror Show and then Beetlejuice.
Okay, we had all of the others. And then just
Very
to add
good.
in more, just add in a few more. Yeah,
Great.
back to the PHA and GP to get onto those lists if they need to. So like after assessment, maybe they do, especially if there's a long waiting list. So, but it would be done kind of with the parent involved. That would be very kind of gentle, and the home visitor would be working on that. And also to support the mom, to nurture the family as well, to get the mom maybe suggest to go to the family resource centre, maybe support with creche. Get maybe mom and parent and toddler groups, so just that she's kind of helping herself, and back then to the mom too, to check in, did she do her medical checks with their community mental health team, and so the practical. So we went with the easy first, and then the more complex, and the ones that needed to be done first, like the getting on the list and things, but very gently though, with the mom kind of on board and working as to what she thinks is the priority. So,
brilliant, thank you. Beetlejuice, that you were Beetlejuice, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then Hocus Pocus.
We're Beetlejuice. We had everything that was said already, and I know we're typing these up to pass them back. So just the one thing I suppose that that nobody has said is we'd link in with the aunt, get the mum to link in with the aunt and see if the aunt can actually help out, even on a short-term basis, until the mum finds her feet in the area.
Brilliant idea. A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then Hocus Pocus.
Yeah, our main outcome would be in Mehel as well, to get the PHN, the principal, the auntie for support all around the table, and for the services all to come together to put a plan in action.
Very
so
good.
that was the main conversation, and obviously supporting the parent. Yeah.
Brilliant. Hocus Pocus, and then The Shining.
We mentioned everything except the Mehel, funny enough, but we kind of talked about how the importance of a home visiting program, and how the listening visit is so important, and to have as much information as possible before you go in, rather than doing your tick box, and checking to see that the history that maybe from previous area that she was in, just so that those reports could be passed on to the new area.
Brilliant, great. The Shining, and then The Exorcist.
Yeah, we talked about the Mehel as well. We thought that would be a good approach for this mum, given her previous experience of postnatal depression and not coping now, the difficulties with the behaviour of the child and the speech concern she has for her young man, and also the lack of support that she has apart from the aunt. I suppose what we also talked a wee bit about how sometimes there can be a bit of dismissiveness maybe from those maybe in the health professions, and the parent goes away feeling okay, they're a more experienced other, and they go away thinking that they haven't been heard, or then the child maybe goes to preschool, goes to creche, and the alarm bells go off, and there's already a delayed process there. So I suppose it's encouraging the parent, to really, to understand that they are the most informed person about their child and know their child best, and to encourage that, and to give them, I suppose, the platform to be able to take that forward in a supportive way.
Yeah, and giving them the language and the confidence to deal with professionals, I think, is such a vital role of the home visitor. And as somebody mentioned earlier, accompanying them as they talk to them. And finally, but not least, The Exorcist.
We talked about all of that, all of what was discussed there. And I suppose to add something, we focused, I suppose, on self-care and empowering the parent to seek solutions for themselves, just open up a discussion and talk about their own interests and what they would like to do as a self-care aspect. And then, so it could be to get the aunt involved and to get her support, so the mom could maybe listen to a podcast for about 10 minutes, or do some yoga or something like that.
Gotcha. And I think the other piece, and I'm just reminding you about Sonia's piece on the 20th of January, your own self-care and professional boundaries, because this is a very complex case. You know, the family has a lot of needs. So how do you support yourself in terms of supporting the families? Brilliant. So just to say, is there anything anybody feels that hasn't been said and needs to be said as part of that?
Just in terms of Jack, the older boy who's late for school, we were saying, you know, to link in with the school, with the homeschool liaison in the school, and get Jack some sibling support. And is there any groups that Jack, like football or something that Jack can get involved in to make some friends there, and not to forget Jack.
Yeah, and sometimes that was the point Zara made, that siblings can't be forgotten. Brilliant. Yeah. Louise, had you anything else? I know I kind of cut you short very much there. No? You sounded
no,
as if
really
you had
just we were I suppose just that, like, you know, what I thought as well, the 3-month-old baby, I mean, I know from experience, I was still in touch, or I was allowed the maternity hospital. I was still under their tongue until my child was 6 months old. So I could link in with psychologists, psychiatrists, people that have lots of that type of, you know, specialized for postnatal depression, I suppose, if that's what it is. They can get in touch with groups or anything that's even in the local maternity. I know she's moved away, but, you know, maternity hospital.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay.
And
so
another thing too, as well, just,
sorry,
you know, the relationship you preserve as a home visitor, to really, you know, to be that one person that's going to listen, which is what Zara said, and to work on the relationship so that you can really, she can feel heard, and that, you know, with all the chaos, that there's someone solid and consistent. And you can start very simply by, even with the kid who has the language difficulties, you can start reading with the kid, and, you know, so start simple things without getting overly overwhelmed with the complexities. So I think there's a lot we can do as home visitors, that we can, you know, rather than thinking that other people can do it, sometimes we can do gently in the home ourselves, and then nudge gently onto the next level if we feel it needs to be pushed on. But and every area will have their own specialist areas, like social prescribers and all that, and they might come into the mix later, or, you know, over time, you know. So.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll end, because I think it just highlights the importance of home visitors. And again, we're at a very important point in terms of a national conversation about agreed approach to home visiting. So just to remind you again about the Karen What Works workshop on the 28th of October. It's only in 2 weeks' time. And if you want to contribute to the discussion, Deirdre Ford, who is, I just saw she's going to have the call, but she's one of the lead researchers of Maynooth, was on this call. So please get involved. And just again, thank you all very much. And to thank Michelle, Mary, Trish, Katrina, Sue, and have I got everybody? Sue.
Yeah, and all the facilitators. Thank you.
And all the facilitators who because I mean, the amount of work to put this together is tremendous. And I think it really, really shows the skills that that's across the home visiting network, that you can actually put such a wonderful piece together. I'm just sitting here going, it's all done for me. Thank you very much. So thank you to everybody. Thanks to Zara again. And if you have any suggestions for any more of these type that you would like, one of the things we talked about was getting Zara back again, maybe to talk about boundaries and supporting our own boundaries and supporting parents' boundaries, and boundaries with other professionals. Is one idea. So if there's anything else, thank you and enjoy your weekend. I hope we get great weather for it.
Thank you. We'll send you on the link of the video next week. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thanks a million. Fair play.
Happy Friday.
Bye.
Bye.